you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock. This is your host, Bruce McGuire.
And JR.
And we are tackling one of the greatest mysteries of our time, possibly the solution to the entire UFO phenomena, with or without government involvement and overlap in a far-reaching conspiracy known only as Project Bluebeam. I've referenced this multiple times in the past, and I'm here with JR, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the background of Project Bluebeam and how viable this kind of project would be in ushering in a new world order in the face of a non-existent extraterrestrial threat and what that would mean for tyranny across the world in typical Mindshock fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons will get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. You could also support the channel by being a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Okay, so I probably have dropped the Project Bluebeam moniker at least a dozen times in various podcasts, and people are always asked, what is it? What exactly is it? Why is nobody talking about it? And that's one of the critical pieces of the puzzle, I believe. And I will explain why, but first, let's go into the history of Project Bluebeam, because even the history of the so-called whistleblowing of Project Bluebeam is under a shroud of mysteries, and hopefully JR can clear up a lot of things. Now, actually, before we get into that, did you ever state your official stance on the UFO phenomenon?
I don't believe I have, Bruce.
Well, can you at least give us a generous summary of what you believe based on your involvement with the government? Or not even your involvement with the government. Like, what's your position on the UFO phenomenon?
Well, Bruce, I have to say that, like, you know, when you think about it, the people, I mean, as a species, we crave to know more about the unknown. I mean, it's what drives the human race forward, right? I mean, like, look at computer technology. Like, we didn't know any of this shit 100 years ago, but, like, we learned, and now we know. So, I mean, you know, like, we're always going to crave, and I think there's always that subplot, right? And that pre-exists the United States of America, right? Like, that I mean, that goes back to Egyptian times. I mean, like, we're still studying the pyramids. Why? Because it's unexplained. The people that, like, were involved, they're long gone, and, like, you know, there's all this, like, really complicated shit, like batteries, that we don't seem to understand how they understood how to do this, like, you know, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago. So, you know, like, I think that the unexplained is intriguing to the human subconscious, and I think that's just why we move forward.
Well, you didn't answer the question, JR. Like, what's your position on the like, we did a podcast on Roswell. If you haven't checked that out, check that out. We went into various different theories on what that crash could have been. But Roswell aside, what is your position on, even throughout history, UFOs being depicted on cave walls, in paintings throughout the...
Well, I mean, obviously, Bruce, you know, if you're going to ask me as a personal person, outside of the whole, I work for the government, blah, 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 I do believe that UFOs exist. Why? Because, I mean, let's look at the laws of mathematics. We're, you know, a society that's based our entire infrastructure on the laws of mathematics, okay? You know, the physics, you know, whatever. So let's look at the mathematics of there not being aliens. And then let's look at the mathematics of there being aliens. If we look at the mathematics of there being... Wait, let me finish. If we're looking at the mathematics of there being aliens, okay, we're talking about we're one of billion whatever to the whatever power planets, and billion to whatever of the amount of universes, and we're here, and we know that. Whether you graduated and you have a PhD and you're a Mindshock listener and you're rolling in your Maybach listening to this podcast, or you're Joe Blow who's just happy to be getting that $100 for whatever, raking leaves because you came to this country. However, okay, the bottom line is is that you're here. Whether you're smart, stupid, whether you speak English, you don't speak English, Democrat, Republican, don't matter. You're physically here. So if you're here and you live amongst billions of other star systems, then there must be somebody else. And then if you look at the other side of the mathematical equation, there's nobody else. So, I tend to believe in aliens. I think that that's the intelligent person believes in extraterrestrial life. If you don't, then maybe Mindshock's too sophisticated for you.
Well, don't go speaking for Mindshock now, because I'm about to dismantle everything you just said. So,
go ahead. You normally do.
So what you're referring to, I believe, is the Drake equation, which was the foundation for SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrials, and a very expensive program, by the way. And so, yeah.
Well, no, actually, that's just, I call it, my equation is called common sense. It's not the Drake equation, but keep going.
Common sense is not so common, though. So here's the thing. You stacked a bunch of presuppositions. Mathematics doesn't prove anything, because if we're measuring unicorn moon juice, and we can get the measurements perfectly, like it's all these milliliters, that still doesn't prove it's unicorn moon juice. So you can use math, like I could say, oh, well, I see 10 ghosts in front of me right now. There must be another 10 in the next room, so there's going to be 20 ghosts. 10 plus 10 is 20. Therefore, the math works perfectly and the ghosts are real. So the math doesn't really prove anything. Also, you presupposed, and I know a lot of flat earthers are going to be upset with you.
Wait a minute. Let me just, follow up with that. Technically, we live in a particular place, in a particular point of time. Flat earthers and non-flat earthers both concede that point.
No, actually, therefore, I don't believe that. I believe there's a certain...
Wait. Let me finish.
Yeah, but you can't make statements like that.
Wait. Let me finish. So, based on our particular point in time, we've created the fantasy of mathematics within our realm. If you move to the next planet over, the mathematics will be completely different.
You gotta give me at least a minute here, because you're kind of going off tangent again. So if there are no planets, now this isn't even really about flat Earth, because if Earth is something that's not even necessarily can be described as a flat plane or a sphere, regardless, you're presupposing a solar system and everything working as alleged. But that's a presupposition, because if you can't prove that planets are terra firma and they're just not lights in the sky, because some people believe in a model where water's above, water's below. So if we're in a snow globe and space is water, those are just lights reflecting. So it doesn't matter how many lights are reflecting above the cathedral of stars enclosed in this dome, whatever.
But you just proved my point, Bruce, because what I'm saying is mathematics could totally 100% be wrong. But based on the accepted reason of mathematics, for the people that accept mathematics, it's completely illogical for them to accept that theory of mathematics and not believe that aliens are real.
Okay, what I just said had nothing to do with math. Just bear with me for like 30 seconds. So if all of these lights in the sky, these reflections, are actually coming from either another dimension or within our own dome, if that's what the model is, regardless of the shape of the...
By believing in dimensions, you're believing in mathematics.
Okay. Just forget about mathematics for a second. Because your justification was that there's infinite planets and an infinite universe.
I'm saying that if you believe in the current model of mathematics, you believe that.
But that has nothing to do with math. There's plenty of people who believe in math, but they don't, there's all groups. Forget about all the different groups of people. Let's just talk about the principle.
Well, it's based around odds.
No. But you're counting odds that don't exist. Like you're saying, okay, if you're playing cards and there's 52 cards, but what if you're not even really playing cards? So why are you counting the math of the cards if there are no cards?
You're really going to piss off the people simulcasting right now at the racetrack, Bruce.
I'm just saying.
Because they have hope.
So now I'm just saying, you're right. Like the only thing this is Mindshock, so I don't know if we could say we really even know this for sure. But if we exist, we exist in the here and now. So you made a justification that in an infinite universe with infinite planets, mathematically there would be extraterrestrials. Even that is not necessarily true, because if we're living in some kind of simulation, like if it's a video game and they just never bothered, like the designer of the game it was too much work to render all the other life on other planets, so they just never bothered. So it's only Earth because the video game's about Earth. It's kind of like in a video game where there's some far-off distant lands, nothing's really rendered on them. There are no people there. They're too far, but they're kind of there just for the background. But there was no reason for the video game designer to actually render any life beyond the main point of the game. So if Earth is kind of like the main area of the game, even if there was an infinite universe, if it's designed, mathematics doesn't necessarily support that. It all depends on the variables. So if you don't know the variables, you can't make that statement where mathematically and logically there would be life in the universe, because you don't have those variables required to make that determination.
Just know that I'm not going to push this argument further, but my algebra teacher would punch you in the mouth right now. And possibly curb stomp you.
For what? Do you understand the concept I just laid out?
I do, but you're talking about a particular simulation, but if it was a simulation, then it would be based on a finite set of rules. Whether or not those are math, or whether or not they're called something else by the people who are constructing it, there's a construct. There's an overarching construct. Okay, so, but based on our language, we refer to constructs of that sort as mathematics. So
that's fine. I'm just
but if that's the case, based on the construct within the accepted, doctrine of the human species, whether or not we're real, or whether or not we're artificial intelligence, or whether or not we're part of a simulation, or we could be in a petri dish. It really doesn't matter. What it is there's a certain construct based on the odds of that construct.
But you can't determine the odds. It's kind of like if you're picking a card from a stack of cards. If you don't know how many cards there are, you don't know the odds.
No, you don't. But that's true. So, but what you're saying is that it could be. So
what I'm saying is you don't even know that it is a deck of cards.
So based on wait. So you're talking about the card theory. So now,
no, not necessarily. I'm saying not only do you not know how many cards, but you don't even know if it's a stack of cards in the first place, because you kind of presuppose a certain cosmology that the ancients would disagree with. Now, this is Mindshock. I'm not making any claim that any model is true. I'm just saying willy-nilly, infinite planets, infinite universe.
Yeah, but like the actual ancients, like they accepted UFOs without question, and that's documented. So, I don't know where you're rolling with this, but at the end of the day, let's move the conversation forward. Maybe we can revisit this.
No, I want to get this nailed down. So you're right. So the ancients, what did they think UFOs were? The UFOs, they believed, again, we're playing broken telephone with their translation. So you could argue it was some kind of spiritual, demonic, or angelic manifestation, right? Like, do you have evidence?
One of my favorite lines from the Lord of the Rings, which was actually in the book, because 90% of the movie, actually 99.999% of the movie was not in the book, but one of the lines was in The Two Towers, which is the second book, where the narrator states that fact becomes legend. Legend becomes myth. You'll notice as we move further and further from antiquity, this becomes more and more of a question. Whereas in antiquity, we didn't really have a problem with accepting this.
Okay, but let's try.
Whether you believe in religion, whether you believe that they were gods, or whether you believe that this just occurred, the acceptance level was like 99.9%.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But the acceptance of what? Are you actually arguing the ancients believed in all these physical planets off in the distance, and that aliens from those?
Not necessarily planets, but physical, spiritual beings. Yes.
My question was what their origin, not whether they themselves were physical beings, but their origin. Because if you look at any ancient cosmology, they don't really, at least none that I've seen, they don't involve the heliocentric model per se, where there's...
Well, because in antiquity, these things were already considered myth. Just listen to the previous line that I just stated.
I don't think you're understanding my point. I'm not talking about the UFOs themselves. I'm talking about the cosmology and other planets. There were no other physical planets in ancient cosmologies. They were kind of... there were planes of dimensions, planes of existence, if you will. I mean, everything from the Norse mythologies, literally every single cosmology except the Greeks. The Greeks were divided. If you haven't checked out some of the flat earth analyses I did, the Greeks were kind of divided. Some of the ancient Greeks supposedly thought the world was a sphere. Other Greeks thought it was a flat plane. But other than the Greeks, all of the other ancients pretty much had a snow globe cosmology with other realms above this realm and other realms below. It was not a heliocentric model where there's these infinite planets and infinite space. So in their view, UFOs did not come from other planets.
Okay, but you're also, you have to understand one thing about that, and I'm not saying that they were wrong, but in their time, tools, the idea of tools, which would be something that you would go and utilize to make your life easier, was finite. Whereas in today's world, it's infinite.
Okay, that has nothing to do with what I just
said. Wait. That changes the perception psychologically with the culture, and most people follow a pack mentality when it comes to that. So if one person says, you know, I can fly, there's going to be a percentage of people, regardless of whether or not they're on drugs or whatever, that believe they can fly because that person said it.
Okay, that has nothing to do with what I said. But anyway, so circling back to UFOs, aliens, whatever. Okay, so you're making a connection so you believe in the heliocentric model and that there's alien life out there. Now,
I didn't say I believed in anything, Bruce. Be very careful with the way you phrase it.
What did you say? It would be logical to assume that?
I'm saying that I believe that there's aliens, whether or not they look anything like us, and whether or not they have ill or positive intent, or whether or not they give a shit that we're here, or whether or not they're intelligent beings, or it's simply just like, you know, like when you look at a fish tank, hey, it's like, look, like, that planet has grass. Like, you know, that's extraterrestrial. Like, you know, it doesn't matter. All I'm saying is that, do I believe in alien life forms? Yes, I do. And you know what? I don't really give a shit if you think I'm stupid or not. You know, you can end the call. Like, I think there's alien life forms. I think that based on everything that I know, as the person I am, whether I'm a hologram or whether I'm real, I've come to the determination that there's probably other life out there somewhere. That's my personal belief.
Okay, so...
Is it government? No. You know, am I going to tell you anything that I've seen? You know, like, you know the way I roll. But, like, no. I mean, I believe in that.
Okay, are you done talking? Can I talk now?
Perhaps.
Okay, so in the connection with UFOs, do you believe there's a connection between UFOs and extraterrestrial life, regardless of whether the extraterrestrial life is coming from other dimensions, or regardless if the Earth is an infinite plane and the extraterrestrials are coming from across the plane, as opposed to other planets in a heliocentric universe?
Yes, I believe that anything foreign, and I say that very carefully because I do work for the government. When I say that, I don't mean anything where there are political boundaries on Earth. I mean that anything that comes from someplace other than Earth to my point of residency is or somebody else's point of residency that's listening. I'm not talking about persons. I'm talking about anything that comes from outside of the Earth itself. I would consider extraterrestrial, whether or not it's from another dimension on Earth or whether it's physically from Earth. I consider foreign bodies to be one and the same.
Okay. Before we get into the one and only Bill Cooper and Project Bluebeam, I'm going to go to one of so-called originators of this theory, even though it technically predated him. The one and only Serge Monast. Born on an unknown day. So he was born in the year 1945, allegedly. He died December 5th, 96. He was a Canadian investigative journalist, poet, essayist, and conspiracy theorist. He is known to English-speaking readers mainly for originating the conspiracy theory Project Bluebeam, which, again, we're going to get into whether he was really the one who originated it or not, which concerns an alleged plot to facilitate a totalitarian world government by destroying traditional religions and replacing them with a New Age belief system using NASA technology.
Oh, of course, because there's something you could stoke reality on.
Biography. In the 70s and 80s, Monast was a journalist, poet, and essayist. He was an active member of the Social Credit Party of Canada. In the early 90s, he started writing on the theme of the New World Order and conspiracies hatched by secret societies, being particularly inspired by the works of William Guy Carr. We're not going to get into him for now. Monast founded the International Free Press Agency, the AIPL, where he published most of his work on these themes, achieving some prominence with an interview on esoterist and ufologist Richard Glenn's TV show Esoterism Experimental, in which he repeatedly warned his audience about the dangers of a world government. He was interviewed by Glenn a number of times up to 1996. In 94, he published Project Bluebeam, in parentheses NASA, in which he detailed his claim that NASA, with the help of the United Nations, was attempting to implement a New Age religion with the Antichrist at its head and start a new world order via technologically simulated second coming of Christ. He also gave talks on the topic. Other conspiracy theorists have noted the similarity of Project Bluebeam to the plots of Gene Roddenberry's unreleased 1975 Star Trek movie treatment, The God Thing, and 1991 Star Trek Next Generation episode, Devil's Due. In 1995, he published his most detailed work, Les Protocoles de Toronto 6.6.6, modeled upon the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, whereas he said a Masonic group called 6.6.6 had for 20 years been gathering the world's powerful to establish the New World Order and control the minds of individuals. By 95 and 96, Monast said he was being hunted by the police and the authorities for involvement in networks of prohibited information. He had homeschooled his 2 children, where they were taken away and made wards of the state in 96 so that they would receive a public education. He died of a heart attack in his home in December 96 at the age of 51, the day after being arrested and a night in jail. His followers claim his death was suspicious, suggesting he was assassinated by psychotronic weapons to keep from continuing his investigations, and that Jerry Fletcher, the Mel Gibson character in the 1997 film Conspiracy Theory, was modeled on him. Copies of his work still circulate on the internet and have influenced such later conspiracy theorists as American evangelical preacher Tex Mars. Some of his later works have been reissued by French publisher and conspiracy theorist Jacques Delacroix, along with others writing on the themes of Monast's conspiracy-related works. So let's digest all of this, and first of all, what are your general thoughts on Monast? And also, can you give us more information on these alleged psychotronic weapons? I'm sure they're referring to the heart attack gun and things of that nature.
Well, first of all, I want some gravy. Second of all, Bruce, I'm not really going to get into any particular, conspiracy theories. I mean, I think we should probably do, if you wanted to do, I think it would be to our interest to do a NORAD podcast. That might put some of this to bay, but I don't know. I mean, keep going.
Well, what about psychotronic weapons? Do you have Do you have anything to say?
I'm not gonna get into anything that I know about. I mean, all I know is like, look, all right, so. I mean, I can't really talk about any particular things, but like, let's just say that, like, you know, in terms of the Air Force has done a lot of things over the years. Okay, so I mean, you know, like, and there's been a lot of experimentation. I mean, look at the movie Men That Stare Goats. You know, I mean, like, you know, so the government is willing to do a lot of things with your tax dollars. You know, because it wants the upper hand, and you know, like. Am I going to deny the existence of psychotropic? No, I'm not. Am I going to talk about them? No, not really. But yes, I will agree that it's been explored, and it has. And to the Mindshock listeners that, you know, really pound the dirt hard enough, and, you know, like, I'm sure we've got at least one listener from Anonymous out there, you know, maybe they'll be able to post a comment.
So let's examine Monast's protocols here, the Toronto protocols. Here's an Amazon book review. I actually haven't read them, so I don't know if you have, but here's the summary.
No, I don't read any of this shit.
So
I'm sorry to Manaz or whatever. It sounds like some sort of shit for my fucking SATs. Like, you know, like, I have to take the Manaz primer.
On book reviewers, staggering. Everybody needs to know what's in this book. Translation from French in part.
Wow, is it a verified purchase? I mean, don't tell.
Can you let me read this and then you can give your thoughts?
I'll let you read the Amazon review of an ebook. Sure, no problem.
I believe this is a reviewer from the hard copy. But anyway, everyone needs to know what's in this book. Translation from French in two parts, one from 1967 and one from 1985. These Masonic plans, discovered and published in 95 by French journalist Serge Monast, were dismissed at the time as a wild, impossible conspiracy against humanity. Serge Monast died within a year of publishing, aged 51, just one day after being released from jail. Seeing with 20/20 hindsight, you see what they did there? They cannot now be so dismissed. Herein every bad thing which has befallen us is detailed and its wicked purpose described. You find plans to crack families apart, introduce promiscuous behavior, diminish skills, manage science, history, and religion, leave children rootless, and make them belong more to the state than the family, challenge the male-female paradigm, alter sexuality. I mean, was this guy ahead of his time in the early...
Well, no, actually, he was probably behind it. I mean, like, you know, this is all in, like, the French Revolution, but keep going.
Make sexual satisfaction more important than love, diminish bonds of love, nullify God, heaven, and spirituality, delete the idea of souls, manage the weather to cause catastrophes. I mean, was he whistleblowing on HAARP? Poison food with chemical and genetic means, weaken health and intellect using an alternative word for injections, and other medication, harmful frequencies, damage to the unborn, in decrease of fertility, leisure as a corroding pastime, films and media to corrupt minds, making man a slave to his senses, the diminution of parental influence and power, child power, unemployment, transfer of employment to third world, death of social harmony, austerity budgets, control policing, get rid of old experienced and bring in young police, transfer of military from national to UN control, UN judiciary and global databases, denaturing of common foods. There is much more than this, but it is terrifyingly close to what has happened and it is almost complete. It's a small book worth your time and money. It could save us if enough people know. No matter where it came from, to see it from 2020 and where we have come II, since it was published, clearly confirms it as a true plan. I mean, that is some damning predictions there, and we're going to get into Bill Cooper in a moment, who, if anybody that's read Behold the Pale Horse...
Well, he clearly didn't like America very much, but, like, my question is, I'd have a beer with the guy if, like, you know, I could hear what he thought about Lafayette, we are here.
Well, before you interrupted me, I was mentioning Bill Cooper's Behold the Pale Horse also had these stunning predictions. I mean, let's go over Bill Cooper's 9/11 prediction just for the coincidence theorists that want to write this off as coincidence. I mean, you mentioned math at the beginning. Let's figure out mathematically what the statistical chances of what he said about 9/11 actually being true, given infinite probabilities. So he stated on June 28th, 2001, so this is mere months before 9/11, whatever's going to happen, they're going to blame it on Osama bin Laden. Don't you even believe it. The CIA created bin Laden. They recruited him, they trained him, they found his leadership. They are now using him to help bring about world government by making him the big boogeyman because they can't use Saddam Hussein anymore. I mean, that's kind of curious that in June he called bin Laden being blamed for some big event.
Right, but I mean, again, like, okay, so he was a shill, like, and that guy knew it. That doesn't necessarily prove, I mean, the fact is, wait, before we look at the coincidence theorists, okay, the fact is that these were real physical people, and real physical things happened to real physical individuals. Okay, we agree on that, on both sides. Okay, these weren't virtual people that died. They were real people. Whether or not it was a planned demolition, or whether it was really terrorists, or whether it was, you know, to stimulate the economy, or whatever your belief is, the fact is that actual people perished and continue to perish from the incident.
Well, if you want to be intellectually honest, you also have to mention the people that were claimed to have perished that didn't perish, that are still alive. So,
but I mean, again, we go back to mathematics. It's the odds are that there are people that are going to lie. People are going to tell the truth most of the time, based on trend.
The official death list released by the government has people that became journalists for CNN. Let's not get into that. Okay.
So here's another quote from Behold a Pale Horse, his infamous book, of course, which most of it has already come true now. The government encouraged the manufacture and importation of military firearms for the criminals to use. This is intended to foster a feeling of insecurity, which would lead the American people to voluntarily disarm themselves by passing laws against firearms. Using drugs and hypnosis on mental patients in a process called Orion, the CIA inculcated the desire in these people to open fire on schoolyards and thus inflame the anti-gun lobby. The plan is well underway and so far is working perfectly. The middle class is begging the government to do away with the Second Amendment. And you know what's kind of insane? I mean, this book was published in what, 1991?
This is pre-Columbine. If you haven't checked out the Columbine Conspiracy series on Mindshock, it is the most comprehensive analysis of the Columbine shooting and the possible government connections to it. And then, of course, there's certain shady situations regarding influence on the shooters in various different school shootings. So do you believe there's some truth to what Bill Cooper's saying here, where the CIA or government agents are actively involved in kind of manipulating, in I guess, a Manchurian-style candidate fashion to get people to just shoot up schools in order to cause this destabilization and the removal of the Second Amendment?
Okay, so I won't speak to the destabilization and the Second Amendment, but when it comes to Manchurian-style manipulations, I do agree. And the reason why is because I believe in Jonestown, and I believe those people were exterminated by the government. I believe there was an MK Ultra experiment. And That's one of the few things that I've actually just openly talked about, and it's because I have firsthand knowledge of what was going on there. And if you really read between the lines and you really look at the sub-documentation, but moreover, like, you know, the people that I've personally dealt with in Maryland, you know, that was really sketch. And I believe in that the government is capable of doing those types of things. Now, to do it to youth and to do it in a school situation, that's deep. I mean, as a father, that's deep. Do I believe that? I'd like to think that they don't. So, you know, I mean, I really, because I know people in very high places, and I'd like to think that they have scruples. So, is it possible? Yes. I mean, anything's possible. We've been talking about possibilities this whole conversation. Do I think that they did that? I think that the Mindshock listeners should heed. I think they should listen to the podcast. I think they should review the evidence for themselves. And I think that they should make up their own mind. I personally would like to think that we don't do that. But there have been instances where we have. So that's something where, as a Mindshock listener, you'd have to explore the evidence and make up your own mind, personally.
Here's the full quote from Bill Cooper on June 28, 2001. Be prepared for a major attack, but it won't be Osama bin Laden. It will be those behind the New World Order. Whatever is going to happen that they are going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you believe it? So what's curious, so he says that June 28, 2001, September 11, 2001, Osama bin Laden is blamed for 9/11. November 5th, 2001, Milton Cooper is shot dead. So is it a coincidence that all of these three events happened in the same year?
Yes and no, probably. I mean, here's the thing. To say that there's going to be an event by the New World Order is broad. I mean, you know, there's a lot of gurus. I mean, the same thing to be said about you predicting the stock market, Bruce. Sometimes you're going to be right. Sometimes, you know, sometimes you're going to be wrong. The ones that are right, they look like geniuses, and they build really big, you know, institutions, and they end up making a lot of money. The ones that are wrong, well, you never hear about them. So, Bill Cooper was right. Whether he had firsthand knowledge, you know, see, it's difficult to explain this to younger listeners, because the fact that he had that level of firsthand knowledge says something. In today's world, you got to look at, like, you know, the younger Mindshock listeners. They're not going to have as much respect for what you're personally saying, because in his time, in that time, to know that, to predict that, there were no computer systems predicting that in that type of capacity. You know, your average 20-year-old that's listening to this doesn't really understand that that technology was not available to the public like it is today. Like, you could just ask AI, hey, you know, what do you think? Like, it didn't exist. So for him to know the specific person is compelling. Whether or not I'm going to disclose to you what you know, the government thought in 2001 about Osama bin Laden, I'm not going to tell you that. But what I will say is that that's a very hush-hush thing, and at that particular point in history, I think that's quite fascinating. I'd like to look at the man's whole life.
Well, actually,
and I think maybe perhaps we should explore him.
Yeah, we're gonna do that in a minute, but let's just finish up with Serge Monast here. Here's an interesting post on the conspiracy subreddit. Did Serge Monast, the original theorist behind Project Bluebeam, a fake alien invasion, get everything right? ? I believe that Monast.
I'll also say this. This is making me crave some freedom fries right now, or what are the French fry freedom fries, right?
Come on.
Keep going.
So this is posted by Ua Cantona. I believe that Monast's version of Project Bluebeam is very interesting, but I find it hard to believe every single element of it. I think there is enough information to suggest that a fake alien invasion may happen, but every single element of his theory not so sure. Here are some theories on what may have happened. Was Monast possibly a government agent who theorized Project Bluebeam publicly, but added a lot of extra stuff in order to stop people from taking it too seriously in case anything was leaked in the future by a more credible source? What do you think about that? Some people think the same about Alex Jones, that he's some kind of shill and he's got this larger-than-life crazy persona so people don't take him seriously while he leaks these nuggets of truth, if there are any.
Well, I mean, see, that's a very delicate dance, Bruce, because, I mean, like, let's look at it from devil's advocate perspective. Let's say that he's a shill. Let's say he's a fraud. Well, any fraud worth his cup of flour, there's always going to be that veneer of truth, right? So even if he was a fraud or was a shill, we can't discredit 100%, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So even then, there's something there that's tangible.
Well, let me ask you.
I mean, supposing.
Let me ask you this: in the whatever 80s, he's alleging that he has these Freemason documents or Masonic documents or whatever from the 60s and 80s, and he kind of devised all of this from those documents released in the 90s, in the early to mid 90s, 95, 96, and. So do you believe that he got most of this information from those documents and not having been a government agent? I mean, what are the chances that he has this level of accuracy if we're trusting the French translation? Again, if any Mindshock listeners out there have his original books in the original French and can verify the translation we got from the Amazon reviewer, if any Mindshock listeners...
Or at least provide us with original copies of the French translation, and we'll provide our own, certified translation.
Yeah, just as a quick reference, if those claims are true, I mean, that's...
Like by a third party.
If those claims are true, I mean, that level of accuracy, I mean, he's up there with Bill Cooper with that level.
Well, he's up there with fucking Socrates, but, like, I mean, the fact is that, like, the possibility exists that, he just got lucky. I mean, based on mathematics, it's possible, but unlikely. Yeah. Now you're entering the other side of the equation, Bruce. Now you're entering the other side of the equation. The mathematical likelihood of him.
Again, the mathematical likelihood is impossible due to unknown variables. However, just based.
My algebra teacher is really like that curb stuff to you.
Now I'm going to beat down your algebra teacher if you don't stop talking about your algebra teacher. So, if they're still alive, but...
I hope. She used to talk to me all the time when I was a little boy. I mean, we're going back years here. We're going back decades. But she always talked about going to the Cayman Islands. I hope she finally went to that turtle farm. I really did. She had, like, this little boy. Like, she always used to talk about how, like, she was going to retire out there. I hope she did.
Okay, I hope she did, too, but stop mentioning her. Okay, so...
Maybe she watch her be the one that's fucking abducted, right? Like watch her be part of like some sort of interdimensional conspiracy.
All right. So with Monast here, like what are we talking? I don't think he could have gotten that lucky, because if people get that lucky, there should be way more people with those kinds of predictions. Because I mean, before Bill Cooper. Like, I just do not recall, because Bill Cooper seems to have almost never missed. There was one or two things about aliens and UFOs, which we're about to get into with Bill Cooper, but his accuracy is astronomical. Like, same thing with Alex Jones, too. Like, did Alex Jones just really get that lucky with his predictions about, like, frogs turning gay and all the estrogenics in the water? Like, then all of a sudden, within, 5 years, there's scientific studies about the hormones with frogs specifically and all that. Like the guy talks like he obviously.
Okay, all right. Well, when it comes, wait.
I need to finish. You interrupt me too much. So clearly, Alex Jones has some kind of insider sources. Are we to believe that Serge Monast just?
So does the fucking National Enquirer, Bruce. I mean, that don't mean. I mean, yeah, a lot of the shit that they say turns true too. It doesn't necessarily make them a credible.
Well, let's not.
I mean, he's also got his own. You know, he's got to make a limit.
I've been trying to lay out these two theories about Monast for like at least 5 minutes now. Can we stop talking about your algebra teacher in the National Enquirer for just 30 seconds so I can finish this point?
I wonder if Miss Ann ever watched or read the National Enquirer.
So
she hated me too, by the way.
Can you
she
blame her?
Fucking hated.
Did you also interrupt her every 2 seconds in class?
Nah, I was one of these people that didn't do shit and then like got hundreds on her test.
Okay.
I was failing her class even though I got hundreds on her test. She gave me no class.
Are you really going to be the first?
Anyway.
Are you really going to be the first Mindshock co-podcaster that actually gets muted on air?
Well, you could. I mean, you know. Okay, Bruce. I'm sorry. I didn't know I was insulting you.
You're not insulting me. You're just interrupting me every 3. I can't even get 20 seconds of talk time. So
Go ahead.
Are we to believe that Monast here if he came up with all of this by himself, why aren't there all these other people that came up with it by themselves if it's that easy to just pull it out of the ether? So clearly, again, between Alex Jones, Bill Cooper, there's some kind of inside line they must have had, unless they're just the greatest geniuses in the history of Earth, which I don't know. Again, they obviously have a certain level of...
Well, they're French, so they think they are.
I don't think Alex Jones or Bill Cooper are French. I'm talking about all of them. So clearly they have a certain level of intelligence, but I don't know if I would put it so stratospheric as to where they can come up with it. Now, with Jacques Vallée and his UFO theories, maybe. I mean, that guy was clearly a smart guy, and I guess he was French too. So anyway, with Serge Monast here, what kind of an inside line did he have? Did he simply discover this information from documents he stumbled upon? Or was he himself a government agent and then either went rogue or as part of some kind of mind control experiments or otherwise was being used as some kind of shill himself to leak a certain amount of information for the sole purpose of having it be discredited? Finally, I got my point across. There you go, JR. You can... well,
let me ask you a question, Bruce. Who said for 1 second that, like, you know, he went rogue? I mean, have you seen the first fucking 10 minutes of Fun with Dick and Jane? I mean, who said that he wasn't told to go out there and say this to the fucking public?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I gave several different possibilities.
Right. I mean, you know, like, I mean, it covers again, it's the government. One department covers their ass. Hey, we told everyone. This is what's happening. Well, it was top secret. Well, you know, like, we just let them know subtly. You know, like, it's kind of like, okay, so, well, maybe I shouldn't get into this. There was one time I was promoted, okay? They had to legally post the posting for 5 days. They posted it on the men's room door, on the opposite side of the stall. So, like, yeah, like, they posted it. I got the promotion, because they already knew who was going to fucking be promoted. It's the government. And you know they don't owe shit. Like, you know, you're in or you're out. You have to jump in. You get jumped in. It's like a gang, but there's a government.
All right, so
that
was irrelevant to anything I said. But okay, continuing this person's post here. So, did Monast get everything?
Well, it wasn't relevant, but you want to know their process and their line of thought. I'm just letting you know that that's the way it works. So if he's a shill, yeah, okay. But, I mean, you know, there's a lot of shows out there. But, you know, maybe he didn't go rogue. Maybe he was told this by his supervisor. Hey, go out there and say this.
No,
this is what's going on.
Yeah, I outlined several different scenarios. I don't know why you're obsessing with one versus the other instead of just addressing all of them.
I'm not. I'm just agreeing with you.
Then why are you saying, well, who said he went rogue? I didn't say he rogue.
Because most of these times you ask me these questions, and I tell you, Bruce, I can't answer that, or I'm not at liberty to say that. In this case, I'm agreeing with you. You're not used to that. That's why this is so hard for you.
This isn't hard for me. You're asking who said he went rogue. I didn't say he went rogue. I outlined several different scenarios and asked for your input, and you just kind of, you addressed it as if I claimed he went rogue. I outlined several different possibilities.
Okay, I was addressing that to the people that haven't listened to every podcast of us arguing about this type of shit.
I'm asking questions.
Go ahead. I won't interrupt. I'll wait for you to tell me to talk. Go ahead.
Well. So you don't have an opinion. So you think it's more likely that he was a shill than a government agent? But are you saying you find what's just your expertise and experience? What is your inclination about Serge Monast? I realize you haven't stated you knew the guy personally or you knew anybody that knew him. You appear to have not known who he was. So regardless of that, correct me if I'm wrong on that and you actually did know who he was, or if you're not allowed to say. But regardless, let's say this is a hypothetical situation with a hypothetical guy that hypothetically wrote a book leaking this hypothetical information that turned out to be true. What is the likelihood that he is a shill based on the accuracy of the information?
Well, okay, so if I was a video game designer, there would be some sort of fancy subplot that would involve all kinds of crazy shit. But my experience as a government worker, he probably had some cousin that worked for environmental services at some fucking building in France. Because when was the last time we heard France and any type of world event in the same sentence? And he came across this knowledge because he was dumping a garbage can because they were throwing a fucking department party, and happened to come across this information and relate it to his cousin while they were having a couple of beers, in the pub down the street. That's probably what actually happened. But in terms of keeping...
That was so oddly specific. Can you confirm or deny that it almost sounded like you know exactly how he got his information from that? You didn't even skip a beat on that scenario.
Well,
Hey, wait, hold on. JR, do all I have to do is add a bunch of hypotheticals and then you actually give the real information? Is that all I have to do? Because that theory makes a lot of sense. I have to say, that theory makes a whole lot of sense.
I'm not at liberty to move forward, Bruce. You got your nugget for this fucking podcast. You want to try to pull it out of me, that's fine. But you asked me an honest question, I gave you an honest answer. All right, well, there you go. That was the situation at hand.
Yeah, that's a scenario I didn't even think of. But yes, if he had some kind of contact, family member, whoever, that somehow came across either government documents or these Masonic documents or whatever, and then he came into possession of them and then wrote his book based off of that, that would explain how he had some insider knowledge, so to speak. So let's, all right. Well,
let me tell you something. It doesn't matter if you work for the government. It doesn't matter if you're listening to this podcast in prison. Okay, environmental services, they're the lifeline. Okay, they go into every office and they dump every garbage can. Okay, whether or not you tie it beforehand, because there's a special tape you put. Well, I guess I shouldn't talk about that, but there's a special way of disposing of stuff. It doesn't really matter. They have, they go into they've got a key card that accesses every door. There's IT and stuff, but honestly, if you work for the government, and, I do, and I know the way it works, and I hate to really say this, because, you want a piece of honest government information. We throw pretty decent, Christmas parties and shit. We're not really focused on work during certain parts of the year. Shit happens, you're rolling the garbage can around, these people, they buzz around because the food is there, and, they come to the office. Let's just put it this way, Bruce. All right, the environmental services people, there are days that my garbage can lays dormant for days, weeks. But during the holiday season, when the food is around, they dump the garbage can up to 6 times a day. Because, the shit, it's like a mini wedding. All right, so, maybe they saw something or took a phone, picture or something. Well, not in his time. There was probably documents. But, all the facilities.
Dad Polaroid.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into specifics of, how do you think the CIA works? Do you think that they have some high-powered dude that goes there and, the boss and, he extraordinary? No, they got some guy in a fucking dumpster with cameras, just sitting amongst the dirty diapers of the fucking, tenement next door, taking photographs. That's the way the fucking CIA works. I'm really sorry. If you don't believe that, then you shouldn't be listening to this. You think I'm fake? That's the way that this really happens. Okay? I mean, like, that's just, you want to talk about dream factories on Mars and all this other crap. Okay, fine. Call me an asshole. All right? I don't believe in any of that. But, I mean, you know, like Lear does, that's a whole separate thing.
The question.
You want to know how the CIA works from my perspective, it's fucking, you know, people walking around.
Let me ask you this.
I mean...
No, let me ask you this. Do you believe that John Lear believes?
John Lear is of a different, he's a very wealthy, indentured, enriched person. Okay, so his experiences might be different. For me, the next time, you know, you go to your local Starbucks, really look at your barista. That's the CIA, okay? It ain't no dream factory on Mars. There's no secret Manchurian can. They pick these innocuous people that roll in between department to department. That's how this fucking information gets passed. It's not. It's like a prison. You want to know how the CIA works? Bruce, watch fucking Lock Up Raw. That's how you know how the CIA works. Okay? Or watch the first half of the Shawshank Redemption. That's how the CIA works. All right? You know, there's a guy that can get it for you. Yeah, because he rolls a scum bucket. Like, that's how it works.
You didn't answer the question. Do you believe that John Lear believes his own claim?
I think that John Lear is a complete nut, personally. And I personally believe that, yes, he does. Because he can afford to.
Well, I mean, he already passed, so past tense. But, okay, so let's get to Bill Cooper. So here's another excellent quote for Bill Cooper. Can you name me any other conspiracy theorist, at least of the OGs, that would say something like this? Quote, I didn't make these predictions because I'm some kind of psychic. As a member of the intelligence briefing team on the staff of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, I saw a plan called Majesty 12, which contained an operation called Operation Majority. And that plan outlined all of these things that were to happen from that time into the future, and all I've done is research. Read everything, listen to everybody, don't trust anything unless you can prove it with your own research. That's his quote. So, first of all...
Yeah, I mean, and again, his career, it was probably accurate. I mean, okay, it's his career to the public. It's like a ballpark Frank, right, Bruce? They plump when you cook them. All right, you know, he's a guy who's part of the briefing team. They ain't part of the briefing team. He's probably like some schmuck that made the guy's bed every day, and his fucking notes were sitting next door on, you know, the nightstand, and he just happened to have like a little camera and took a picture every day. You know, like it's, you know, because who would think? Who would think?
I think you missed the point. All these other conspiracy theorists are kind of claiming that what they're saying is the truth, et cetera, et cetera. He's saying not to believe or trust anything unless you can prove it yourself. I mean, does that seem genuine, or is he just this high level?
Yeah.
Or is he this high-level intellectual playing 4D chess, where the only reason he said that was to make himself seem more credible, even if he's not?
Well, okay, so this comes to bullshit, which there's actually a book by a professor in Princeton on bullshit, which, to Joan, truly, I'd like to meet Joan as well. But, yes, it's possible that... you know, if you tell a big enough lie and you tell it often enough, people will believe you. That's possible. Here's the thing, though. You have to look at the scope in which he was saying that. If your theory is correct, where he's saying that, there would be other narcissistic traits of his personality that would move forward, you know, as his story gained traction. That didn't necessarily happen here. So I'm left to believe that we'll just bring him. I mean, you know, and It's not like, I mean, anyone is, if he's not a household name, it's not like, I mean, see, Alex Jones is a household name. I mean, he might not be in every household, but his name is
I would say
out there.
since Alex Jones has been so-called canceled off major platforms, he's become a household name. More people know him than before he got so-called canceled.
Right. So, I mean, okay, well, I mean, that happened under dubious circumstances, and I don't really want to get into that because it involved, like, you know, I mean, I'm a family man, I have babies, so I really don't want to get into that. But it is what it is, and I'm not going to even go there. I never liked the guy from the start. If you listen to, you know, I've never liked him from day one. I think he's a fucking puppet. So, but in terms of what we're talking about,
Take a big Bill Cooper.
I can stomach him more than I can stomach Alex Jones. I really dislike him, and I've disliked
We have to do a dedicated podcast on the Bill Cooper Alex Jones beef, because they actually were beefing for a certain period of time, I believe.
I really can't stand Alex Jones. I mean, it wouldn't be fair because I would just split side with Bill, like, every time.
Okay, well, anyway, let's get into Bill Cooper and his history here. So keep in mind, this is from the wiki, so make of that what you will. Milton William Bill Cooper, born May 6, 43, died November 5, 2001, was an American conspiracy theorist, radio broadcaster, and author known for his 91 book, Behold a Pale Horse, in which he warned of multiple global conspiracies, some involving extraterrestrial life. Cooper also described the HIV/AIDS as a man-made disease used to target blacks, Hispanics, and homosexuals, and that a cure was made before it was implemented. He has been described as a militia theoretician. Cooper was killed in 2001 by sheriff's deputies after he shot at them during an attempted arrest. And we'll get to that in a moment. But actually, from the previous quote, so he alleges that he was part of a intelligence briefing team in the Pacific Fleet, and that he saw a plan called Majesty 12 and Operation Majority. Now, surprise to no one, I can't find anything online about these. Do you know anything about Majesty? So I don't know if this is Majestic 12. It doesn't seem to be. But what about Operation Majority? Do you know anything about that, or are you allowed to say anything about that?
I'm not going to say anything about that. But what I will say is that, you know, like, I have to be very careful over the way I say this. But I will say that there are different levels of government, and I can't speak to why he was shot. And I can't speak to the level of what he was doing when he was shot. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, you know, people sometimes feel that they're above. And at the end of the day, if you're stopped by a police officer, it doesn't really matter who you are or what kind of clearance you have. You've been stopped by a local police officer. And, you know, I side with the arc of the law on that, you know, I think he was kind of out of line, personally.
But if you were there, you don't know what the circumstances were. They actually rolled up on his house, and I believe he warned them for trespassing before they. So there's some people believe they opened.
Any federal officer worth their cup of flour would have applied. That's against the ethos. That I mean, that's just against the core, and it's no. We don't swear to anything like that.
Now,
but you know, there's a certain understanding.
Let me try to save some time here. Any human being, when they believe they're going to be killed, there's a certain preservation instinct. So if you don't know because I don't know the circumstances of that situation, but if he believed he was going to be killed, I would assume any human being with value for their own life, and I believe he had his family with him, they would protect themselves and their family against anybody trespassing and opening fire against them, regardless of whether they had costumes or badges or not.
Well, that's not 100% true, Bruce, because, I mean, even if you look at the Native Americans, I mean, there is a certain understanding that there could be a negotiation. I mean, even David Koresh negotiated. So, I mean, you know, so, I mean, like that,
you missed the point.
I mean,
you missed the point.
But what I'm saying is that
if they knew, no.
What I'm saying is that
no. The main point is, if for whatever reason he knew that they were there to kill him, or again, if he's an American and he believes in the Constitution, if terrorists, regardless of whether they have badges or not, if they're trespassing on his private property unlawfully, trespassers will be shot. Nobody's immune to the law. You can't just trespass on people's property, especially not with your gun drawn. Now, again, I don't know the circumstances of that situation, if that's what happened, but if it is, can you blame him?
That becomes very gray area because, I mean, again, if he was of a certain stature,
if he believed there were people there to kill him, I mean,
okay, so it would have been in his interest to just simply comply with what was occurring.
Well, a lot of people are dead because...
It would have been rectified at a later time.
Well, a lot of people are dead because of that attitude. So, yeah, I mean, on both sides. There are some people who maybe they would have survived if they complied, but, I don't think any human being, should negotiate with terrorists. So if somebody's threatening your life, there's no expectation of compliance with terrorists. Like, you can take your chances, but...
If he was being rubbed out, then I can understand it. The thing is that, I mean, again, I shouldn't be. I mean, if he was being rubbed out, you wouldn't know about it.
You don't need to get into it. You don't need to get into it.
Yeah, it wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. I mean, there's a certain protocol and procedure for this type of shit, and to be quite honest, it just would have been in his interest to comply. You wouldn't even know about, it wouldn't occur like that.
You can't say what was or wasn't in his interest without knowing exactly. I mean, were you there? Do you actually have more information than you're alleging? If you do, that's fine. But I wasn't there, so I can't just assume. A lot of people... No,
I'm not assuming. I mean, he did what he did, and the result is the result. I'm just simply saying that...
we don't really know what he or the other officers did. We don't know what happened. We only know that...
I will say that it's odd that they came in uniform.
Well, we don't know. Do we know that they did? I don't think we know that. So anyway.
Well, you said local police. So.
Well, the official story is that so he shot at sheriff's deputies, but again, that's the official story. We don't really know what happened.
Well, yeah, but if the official story says sheriff's deputies, then there's names. So,
well, it doesn't mean it's
look, let's just not get into that. I don't want to get into that. There's a whole procedure for this type of information. But it doesn't really matter. He's dead, right? So.
Well, even some people dispute that as well. I mean, again, this is Mindshock. I don't hallucinate or pretend to know anything is true or untrue.
All I'm saying is that in accordance with the current story. I mean, I love the movie War Games.
Well, you don't need to talk
so,
about it.
I mean, maybe they give him another identity.
Let me get through this. So the career. Little is known about Cooper's background and education beyond the information supplied in his own account. He claimed to have served in the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force, and Naval Intelligence until his discharge in '75. However, public records only indicate a period of service in the Navy with a ratings code of E5 Sergeant, a petty officer second class in the Navy, including a tour of duty in Vietnam with 2 service medals. At the end of the war, while working in Naval Intelligence, Cooper served on a briefing team for Admiral Bernard A. Clary. Wait, hold on. Let me verify this source, because I remember people actually disputing that. So we have here, this is the New Republic.
Service records really don't mean anything. I mean, then that's common knowledge amongst anyone that serves. Service records are really broad. I mean, it's everyone wants to be Audrey Murphy. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? Everyone wants to be a Patton. It doesn't work that way. There's reasons why they were given the medals they were given. That was strategically implemented. To your average Joe, you served. What you do behind closed doors, there are people that don't even have clearances, Bruce, that deal with classified shit. when the time comes because they're expected to. It's part of their job.
You actually...
I mean, any man, I want to hear from some common folk from the service that have served that post the Mindshock. That's just the way that it works. It doesn't matter if you work in a kitchen. It doesn't matter if you push a broom. It doesn't matter if you're an intelligence officer. Shit happens. That's just the way war works.
Okay, so there's two theories here. Is it possible Bill Cooper really didn't serve on this intelligence briefing team, but if he was, let's say, cleaning the room and he happened to see documents, would he want to dress that up and say that he was on the team because it sounds, I guess, more prestigious?
Well, let's just call a spade, Bruce. If he was cleaning the room, he was part of the team. That's the way the military works. Okay? We're all part of a team.
So
the guy that peels potatoes is part of the team. Wait. You think you can laugh at that all you want, but that's the way that the military works. If you peel the potatoes, you're part of the team. It doesn't really matter. You could be a fucking retard.
We're not talking about the general
team. You're part of it, but I'm saying that his statement that he's part of the team is broad. It doesn't matter if he was in the room. That's all that matters.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying. Maybe he wasn't in the room. So they have the briefing after the fact. He cleans the room, and he sees the documents in the cabinets, and he reads them, and that's how he knows all this stuff.
He would still be part of the team.
Technically, no. He wouldn't be part of a briefing intelligence team if he's just...
Well, yeah, he would. Yeah, I mean, technically he would. I mean, based on the way that the federal government explains it to you as a soldier. But keep going.
We're not talking about generics. We're talking about... So I just posed... I'm saying you came up with a pretty good theory on Monast and how he could have known this stuff. Perhaps Bill Cooper has a similar origin story where he's just a petty officer second class and he stumbles upon these classified documents.
Well... See, now, Bruce, now you're getting into even deeper shit because... when you start getting to that level, they start testing you to see if you're worth your cup of flour. So they start showing you little tidbits here and there so they can gauge if you're going to go up or if you're going to stay where you are. Because after a certain rank, it becomes political. So, again, I'm telling you, this is not top secret information. This is anyone, and I really want some sort of Mindshock person who's ever served in the military, whether you think I'm full of shit or not, to just please, verify this. Because after a certain point, your promotion system, the promotion system becomes political. It's not guaranteed. You're guaranteed to evolve to a certain juncture. After that, okay, you have to start going before a panel of people. All right? So when you reach a certain point of evolution, they start throwing shit at you to test you, to see who you are, what you're about. You start to get a name for yourself. You start to become involved. So he could have been handed certain information. And he did what he had to do with it.
No. What if he discovered it on his own while just browsing through a cabinet?
And again, you're given access, and it's an honor system to certain information.
Well,
so, again, he did what he had to do.
Maybe the Admiral just forgot to lock it one day and one day only. And that was...
Well, I mean, you also have to remember that technology is 10 years behind the times in terms of what the federal system deals with, in terms of what we're dealing with as the private sector.
Okay,
so
right. Let me just get through this. Okay, he then attended a junior college in California and worked for several technical and vocational schools before making his conspiracy theories known, beginning in 1988. Cooper expanded the speculation of earlier conspiracists by incorporating government involvement with extraterrestrials as a central theme. Now, here's another, we're going to get into his everything that happened on the bulletin board system with John Lear, but first, I want to say this. If he did stumble upon some documents he wasn't supposed to see, I mean, obviously the first inclination isn't to immediately write a book about it. I mean, that's putting a target on your back. Is it possible he didn't really write about it till many years later simply because that just got him started on the trajectory to do more research and find out, connect with other people in classified areas or with classified knowledge just to corroborate information from multiple sources?
Well, I mean, keep in mind, Bruce, that we're looking at this from a third-point perspective. I mean, we have all the facts of how those decades played out. He was coming to the understanding and coming to grips with the fact that this was even occurring. He had to notice it first. Like, we're looking at it from an objective point of view where we have all the arguments and we're looking at the history of what he did. But he didn't have the luxury of that. So he actually had to come to terms with the fact that these things were unfolding.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For him to even be intrigued about it in an era in which these types of things, although, yes, they were understood, it wasn't like the internet where you could simply look at Wiki and see the whole outline.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just from a regular person's perspective. We're not talking about classified. We're just talking about in general. Hey, my employer is doing this.
Okay, you made your point.
That's a big...
Yes, you made your point. All right,
okay.
So the other thing I was going to say in response to that is originally Bill Cooper actually thought aliens were real or that aliens were demons, et cetera, and then he later migrated to the blue beam, which we'll get to in a moment, but let's finish his story here. Early involvement in UFO lore. In the summer of 1988, Cooper made his first public comments on the Paranet bulletin board system, an early UFO message board. And again, a lot of people think that the internet wasn't really used until the mid to late 90s. I mean, this is the late 80s, and I know people were actually on the internet even in the late 70s?
Well, I mean, and again...
I'm talking about civilians.
The current, but see, the current internet, I mean, again, this all harkens back to, and I think you know this, Bruce, my understanding of the National Science Foundation. And he was really putting himself out there because people really forget, because the internet has been so commercialized, that he didn't just post this on the internet. He posted this on a government system in the 80s. This is something that the government created. So he was telling his brothers who were on the internet in the 80s, hey, this is happening. That's a very, very deep step to take. That's not like, I'm going to build a WordPress and I'm going to post this online and people are going to believe it and we're going to put it on, TikTok and we're going to become famous. No, he put this on a system that was, there was an extremely limited supply of people on the internet at this point in history, and most of them were associated with the government in some capacity. So that was a deep step. We have to do a podcast on the National Science Foundation, because, I mean, they piss me off more than NASA. Because really, I mean, it's just someone that's dealt with, all this crap for years. I mean, I'm not even going to get into it, but just, the National Science Foundation is just so fake. I mean, it's just so fake. It's just...
So, yeah, that is a good point. That's a good point in how, the internet was viewed back then versus now. So...
Yeah, the internet was a completely different animal back then. And that has to be understood by the listeners.
So let's actually go over Bill Cooper's alleged very first post on this Paranet bulletin board system here regarding the USS Tiru UFO sighting. So Jim Spicer posted here, the question is often asked, why don't more military UFO witnesses come forward publicly and provide names, dates, and places. Surely they aren't really intimidated by such empty threats as JNAP 146E, which provides for hefty fines and jail sentences for breaking silence on a military UFO sighting. Surely they realize the scientific import of their sighting transcends any nationalist or military considerations. If more military witnesses don't come forth publicly, isn't it possible that there aren't really as many hardcore ufologists would have us believe? It is a question I've often asked myself. Telnet is deeply indebted to and a little honored by user Bill Cooper of Fullerton, California, for this, the first known report of a multiple military witness sighting that occurred on board the submarine USS Tiru in 1966. Were you aware of this incident, JR?
I'm not going to talk about whether or not I was aware of it. I will say that I guarantee he earned his Arctic frost nose. But no, I will say that that bitch signed his death warrant because she pointed out not only who he was but where he lived. And it doesn't really matter at a certain point when you start talking about that, especially in the 80s, especially on this new platform that the government produced. You know.
Well, here's
I think we should examine her further. She's probably the fucking unsung shill of all of it.
You mean Jim Spicer?
Well, he probably got a fucking promotion out of it.
I don't even know who that is. I'm assuming it's the guy, one of the main guys of the parent.
Yeah, well, no, he's the fucking guy that ended up getting, like, you know, E9 and running the whole department because, like, you know, they couldn't give him any fucking money. So, like, you know, hey, he's like, let's turn in this scumbag and look good in front of the board.
Let me go over
because it's political.
Let me go over Bill Cooper's actual post here. In 1966, during the month of the Rose Festival in the Pacific Northwest U.S., the USS Tiru, SS-416, left Pearl Harbor bound for Seattle, Washington. This sub moored to a civilian pier near the downtown Seattle area, and thousands of people toured the sub during its stay in Seattle. After its duty as a showboat, it proceeded to a back bay area where it underwent torpedo trials. I believe the area was called Dabob Bay, pronounced Dabob, but I am not sure of the spelling. I include the above information because it should be easy to research. During the cruise from Pearl to Seattle, 5 of the crew had a very unusual experience. During one late afternoon, the sub was cruising on the surface at approximately 10 knots when the port lookout reported a strange contact at a range of 2 miles, 315 degrees relative. The lookout refused to tell the OOD what it was that he had seen, and instead insisted that the starboard lookout and the OOD both look at that area. The 3 men looked through their binoculars toward the area reported and were astounded to see a metal craft larger than a football field tumble from the clouds into the ocean. It actually tumbled end over end, and when it hit the water and sank beneath the ocean, huge geysers of water rose into the air. When the port lookout was sure that the others had seen it, he told the OOD that he had seen it tumble from the ocean up into the clouds. The OOD and the starboard lookout were speechless. Within a few minutes, however, they all became excited when it again rose from the water and tumbled up into the cloud layer. At about the same time, a crew member below queried the bridge about a radar contact at the same range and bearing. Sonar also reported strange echoes. The OOD called for the captain to come to the bridge at that time. He also called for the camera to be sent to the bridge. The captain arrived on the bridge within 2 minutes, and the chief quartermaster was right behind him with the camera. At about the same time, the object emerged from the clouds and fell back down into the ocean. All 5 men witnessed this. The QMC took pictures as it rose up into the clouds and then back down into the ocean again. The 5 men watched for quite a while longer, but nothing else happened. Soon the sub had moved out of visual range, and the captain told all witnesses that they were never to discuss what they had seen with anyone under any circumstances. He stated that the incident was classified information. The captain then went below and sent a radio message. There was no doubt as to what we had seen. It was a metal craft with machinery on and around the outside of it. It appeared to have windows and or lenses placed around its perimeter. It made no noise that we could hear. It did not disturb the sub's electrical systems, nor did it affect the gyro compass. It looked very much like a round flying ship, as in a seagoing ship. It had the shape and form of a saucer with a bowl inverted in the saucer, and it was huge. I will never forget it as long as I live. When I first saw this craft, I believed that my heart literally stopped beating and I was terrified. The name of the OOD was Ensign Ball. The starboard lookout was an American Indian seaman that the crew called Geronimo. The port lookout was a new man who left the sub soon after the return to Pearl Harbor, and his name was Cooper. So he's writing it as if he's not Cooper. I do not remember the captain's name.
But who is the XO?
Hold on. I do not remember the captain's nor the chief quartermaster's name. This is obviously he's lying about that. This is the first time I have ever mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, who is the fucking XO? Like, yeah.
This is the first time I have ever mentioned it since the moment that the captain told me that it was classified. As far as I know, it has never been reported to the public before this incident. It should be easy to verify the facts if you can get a copy of the log and or contact the other witnesses. The names should not be too hard to find in the ship's logs or records. I was the port lookout. I must say that I feel a great uneasiness in posting this, much like the way I felt in Vietnam when my life was in great danger. So that's allegedly the very first post he made on Paranet BBS, discussing the USS Tiru incident, supposedly the very first multi-person military sighting ever reported.
I would have to review that. See, it's probably, like, I have problems, like, Alright, well, I have my own problems with that, and to the Mindshock listeners, I haven't reviewed this. I'll review it and give an update. Like, that account is sketch. Like, there's certain other positions, like XO, FOS Commander, like...
There's no way he didn't know who they were, but obviously he didn't feel comfortable giving their name.
Well, because, I mean, he would have ended up, like, you know, like, it would have been, like, fucking,
then again,
like, you know, the middle part of casino, like, he had, like, I mean, and that's really not even classified, like, they would have taken business into their own hands.
But, I mean, he didn't...
Yeah, the submarine is, but see, the fact is that he, like, loaded certain, like, you know, facts there that only would have been loaded to the XO. So that right there, I mean...
So it's weird that he didn't...
He could have been the... I mean, if he was telling the truth, he would have been the XO. You know what I mean? Like, that's... Yeah. Anyway. Alright, so... Okay. Keep going.
Well, what was strange is he didn't even write out the month. He put the month of the Rose Festival, which is in June in Portland, Oregon. But it's curious, there's no date, but in June... on the USS Tiru, I'm sure you can find out who those people were. So he didn't want to name them, but he gave enough information so that people could find out who they were, I guess. But this is 1988, so I don't know who was he... Like, what was he thinking writing this in 1988?
It's difficult to say. I mean, like, when I learned, you know... Obviously, he was writing it, you know, for... I mean, like, normally, I mean, you would give the sequence of the hour, the sequence of the minute. Where you give the sequence of the minute, you give a sequence of the hour, and then you get sequence of the day, sequence of the month, and the sequence of the year. You know, I mean, you know.
Alright, well, anyway.
They even want to rig now. I don't know, whatever, like, you know, look, like, at the end of the day, like, you know, look, he said what he said, he did what he did, like, you know, but, like, I will say that there's certain information that he, like, just, like, floated right there that would only the XO would know. Like, that's, you know, that's kind of difficult to, you know, but again, you know, I guess, like, you know, I mean, I don't know. That sounds sketch. I mean, especially because it's a submarine, those people are fucking Bruce, I don't know how to tell you. The people that work on submarines are hand selected by, you know, I mean, you have to go through a real process to be put on a sub. It's not like you're just on a big gray boat. Like, you go through. I mean, people talk about the Navy SEAL program and blah, 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 because, Mark Wahlberg made some movie. But at the end of the day, when you're put on a submarine, there's a certain level of understanding that you have with the federal government.
Okay, so does this cast doubt on Bluebeam because...
I think that is relevant, but, I mean, only the people that have ever served will understand that.
Okay, I don't see how it's relevant because... The account.
It is. Trust me.
Okay. The account.
No, but see that's a very forced account of something.
I should have an interruption counter.
Wait. Let me just say this because again, I'm really hoping that someone that served in the military will chime in here with the basics. What he gave was a very Forrest Gump account to something where you're talking about. People are specially hand-selected to work on a submarine as if they were Navy SEALs. That's the level that you have to be on a submarine. The Navy SEAls are not the end-all, be-all.
No, nobody said they were.
I'm saying that his account would have been, there would have been a certain amount of grit to what he was talking about. What I will say is that there's a certain amount of grit and there's a certain amount of slang that we're taught to work into our war stories. And that it doesn't matter if you're a ring knocker, it doesn't matter if, you've gone to, OCS.
If it's relevant, make your point in one sentence. I mean, why are you going...
Because that doesn't exist. And if it did, then it would be a lot easier to swallow.
Okay, so... I actually don't even remember this incident and Bill Cooper in it. So if he really did see this with his own eyes, I mean, during this time period, so in 1966, how advanced is this hologram technology, if it's hologram technology or something of that nature, that a football field-sized metallic-looking object is not only crashing into the water, but it's making gigantic geysers of water come up as it's going up and down through the clouds. So let's just bear with me, JR. If this account is legitimate, what do you think he saw?
I memean, see, again, you're dealing with the ocean, and that's a very unpredictable beast. I mean, it's Mother Nature, and whether or not you believe in aliens or not, you're talking about an instrument that can produce, under the right circumstances, based on mathematics, which we don't want to believe in this conversation, but it can do a lot of crazy shit. So, I don't know the answer to that, Bruce, because it's a gray area. You're talking about a body of waters which may or may not align with physics and mathematics. So it could technically do anything. It could implement its own reverse osmosis if it wanted to, based on our previous conversation.
Okay. But relative to the metallic craft, like what are your thoughts on the metallic craft, the football field craft itself?
I don't know why you ask me these questions. You should really be asking someone from the fucking National Science Foundation or NASA. But
if you want,
or at least the Air Force.
I'll just give my.
Okay. So I was talking about the military listeners, Chair Force. I don't know, Bruce. I mean, again, the government is capable of a lot of things. I mean, you're talking about something. It happened in whatever. Like you're talking about something that it could have occurred now. Whatever could have occurred in 2000 could have occurred in 1970, based on just the level of information and the level of technology transfer. You're talking about this in terms of what the public perceives as current information, as opposed to what the military is working with.
Not necessarily. I didn't presuppose that. But okay, I'll give my thoughts. So
okay.
So I don't know if this could have been holographic in nature, just based on what the water was doing. But if it is a real physical object, again, it obviously could have been designed.
Maybe we should ask Tupac.
If it was a metal physical object, and it was the size of a football field, I mean, the size of a football field, that leans me to hologram. But because obviously, there's actual videos of them testing flying saucers and various aircraft. So clearly, there are physical non-hologram objects that resemble UFOs. So I've never really seen one the size of a football field. But perhaps Bill Cooper got that wrong. But who knows? Perhaps it was some kind of physical object that also had some kind of either holographic or other visual projection built into the technology that made it appear bigger than it was. And I don't know what was going on with the ocean or why it was going from the ocean to the clouds, but who knows? Maybe it was made by the government. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it is really some kind of extraterrestrial craft that came from another dimension or from a farther plane of existence or from another planet, regardless,
Well, okay, so wait a minute. Can I just, all right, just finish what you're saying, because I have a lot to say about this.
No, that was it. You can go.
Okay, so let's pretend for a second that we're all civilians here, right? Okay? And just, I need you to really bear with me for a good 5 minutes.
Well,
because I just want to
under the impression that I'm not a civilian? I am a civilian.
Well, no. I am. But what I'm asking you to do is let me vent for 5 minutes.
You got to.
So we have this government, right? And we have all this money. And, we have the largest military budget in the world. And we have this program called NASA that we put physical objects from land into quote-unquote space. And again, mathematics. We're not going to get into that. What makes you think as a citizen that we don't take craft from land and put it to the lowest point of sea? Now, before you answer that, ask yourself, we all know about astronauts. I mean, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, Jim Lovell. Jim Lovell is the unsung hero of NASA. He flew more like... Buzz Aldrin was actually his bitch. Just read the story of Apollo 8. But do you know one aquanaut? I bet you don't.
No, I can't name any.
I bet you don't, Brooks. Yeah, you can't. No, of course not. You can know, Neil Armstrong. Yeah, so, but, the government has aquanauts. They're not just astronauts. There's aquanauts. So let's look at that. Then let's look at, this, steel structure you're talking about, floating in the plane. We'll call it the origin, okay, because there's the equator. But we'll have sea level be the origin, right? So there's this big steel object. Well, we shoot this big-ass steel object into space. So it's got rockets, it's got boosters, it's got all kinds of crazy shit, and we shoot it to the moon, and it's big-ass, and it actually makes the Earth rumble.
Some people would dispute
What's to say that we don't put something similar into the sea? Whoa. Wait, you said you'd give me 5 minutes.
I said I'd give you 2.
So
You asked for 5.
No. You give me 5. You give me 5, because I have a point. So, we're talking about the origin, right? Well, gee, we have these things, and, they're called aircraft carriers. And guess what, Bruce? They're the size of multiple football fields. And they hold over 5,000 men. In fact, we have civilian equivocals called cruise ships. And they're what I call floating Corona vehicles. Because, airplanes are Corona rockets, right? But, let's just face it. Cruise ships are Corona vehicles. Anyway, they hold up to 5,000 men. Well, if I'm some sort of 5-star general and got billions of dollars courtesy of the National Science Foundation, at my disposal, who's to say that I don't want to sink one of those into the deepest part of the sea for my aquanauts? After all, I do the same shit for my astronauts. So I'm sitting there and, maybe I do. Maybe you should watch the episodes E. Quentin from Thunder in Paradise and see what they could do under the sea. Well, if I'm able to do that under the sea, well, maybe I can shoot from under the sea up into the air. And maybe I could do it at a size that's physically equivocal to one of my aircraft carriers. Well, based on laws of mathematics, which we're not talking about here, that sounds like something that could possibly happen. But in terms of human stupidity, Bruce, someone, somewhere, based on the leadership of the past 50 years in America, with unlimited funds at their disposal, would love to do that to show up the Russians. You tell me I'm wrong. Go ahead.
I don't know, but there's a difference between having these large ships that can go deep in the ocean and having vehicles that can just go into the clouds, back into the ocean, and then back.
You mean like Uber?
What?
You mean like Uber? Shit that can drive itself? You don't think the military should ever try anything like that?
What does that have to do with a gigantic object as large as a football field going from the ocean all the way jumping into the clouds and then back again several times? That's a little different than just having a gigantic...
See, that's your problem, Bruce. That's the core problem of your problem. And I'm going to expand my reach to the Mindshock listeners from the federal government that have served in the military to anyone that's ever served in any capacity to any government, from federal to municipal. You're trying to make sense of your argument. Most governments, in my experience, and I've been doing this a long time.
Can you make your points quicker?
Don't make any sense. Yes, I can. They don't make any sense. And if they did, they'd be out of business.
Okay.
Because the only reason why governments succeed is because they have an unlimited amount of tax dollars to fund their harebrained ideas. Who's to say that what he said they didn't try to do? Men stare at goats.
Okay.
Period.
All right.
End of story.
Let's move on.
Just ask the people from MK Ultra.
Okay, so let's move on from the 1966 USS Tiru incident.
Can you dispute what I'm just saying? But can you dispute what I just said?
I would prefer to stay relevant. Biographer Mark Jacobson argues the Tiru incident itself would have not done much to make Cooper's name in ufology. That opportunity came only a few days later, when Bill Cooper was contacted by fellow Paranet poster John Lear. Lear, the son... Do you think it's weird that Lear is just so involved with Bill Cooper, with Bob Lazar? I mean, we discussed this in the past. I just can't get over the fact that...
I think he's a millionaire groupie. Like, that's really pathetic.
Lear, the son...
I really can't stand Lear.
Lear, the son of Learjet founder Bill Lear, identified as a pilot who had flown missions for the CIA. Lear was the author of a post titled The UFO Cover-Up, which incorporated elements of mythos from Paul Benowitz, a ufologist who was later revealed to have been fed disinformation by American counterintelligence agent Richard Dottie. Cooper soon visited Lear, and the two spent much time together from '88 to 1990. All right, so what do you've never actually commented on this, regarding Paul Benowitz being fed disinfo or alleged disinfo by counter-intel agent Richard Dunn.
Why are the counterintelligence people always named Richard? What is that?
So for those that haven't actually watched the Mirage Men documentary from 2013, it was specifically about the conspiracy that the U.S. military fabricated UFO folklore in order to deflect attention from classified aerospace projects. Now, this is what we want you commenting on, JR.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, you're dead silent. I never thought I'd see this.
Bruce, I'm sorry. As someone that is career military, I want to just talk about the process because a lot of people do not understand unless you've served. And it's a compulsion because there's a lot of disinformation out there. And I just want people to understand that the government is us and we are the government. Whether or not it's corrupted is a completely different matter. The fact is that the people involved with the government, whether it's a conspiracy or whatnot, are just people. I mean, watch the first 5, 10 fucking minutes of The Stand.
Right,
It's people. It's not.
Try to stay. We're talking about UFOs.
I understand, but again, you're talking about people seeing UFOs, and it's not a movie. They're just common folk that order shit from Burger King to feed their kids in the back seat because they're hungry.
I'm talking about the specific information fed to Benowitz by Richard Dunn.
I'll listen. I'm just simply trying to add a human aspect because we're talking about these people as if this is a narrative.
We don't need a human aspect added. We need specific information, or at least your opinion on it specifically.
Got it.
All of a sudden, the verbal diarrhea has stopped. Okay, so okay, Cooper visited Lear.
You know what? I can hang up. I mean, I'm giving you latitude here, Bruce. Just get to your point, because you're talking about my fellow coworkers here.
I like how you have absolutely nothing to say about Benowitz and Richard Dunn. All right, let's continue here. So Cooper visited Lear. The two spent much time together from 88 to 1990. Cooper's views were heavily influenced by Lear and his story of alien collusion with secret government forces. In 89, the two released an indictment against the U.S. government for aiding and abetting and concealing this alien nation which exists in our borders. In 2018, columnist Colin Dickey noted the pair's influence, writing, quote, "In the early years, UFO writers did not, by and large, strong political position. They were the tip of a spear, asserting that the number one thing we had to fear was not the little green men, but the government that colluded with them, appropriating their technology against us," end quote. What is your comment on this classic conspiracy theory, again, fronted by John Lear, that the U.S. government was in cahoots with some kind of extraterrestrial presence or extraterrestrial entities in exchange for some kind of, the general story is that the U.S. government would allow aliens to abduct U.S. citizens and cattle mutilations and all this stuff in exchange for high-level technology. And there was even a meeting between Eisenhower and these aliens. That's how the lore goes. What's your take on all that?
Well, personally, it's a lot of, again, we're talking about an age before we could filter disinformation, which, again, we can't filter, so you're talking about a precursor to the real form of disinformation, which is we don't know, so we just believe. But I will say that I could see the government being on board with that. Just from, a general work perspective. Think about it. Your boss is just like, hey, and we got this company, and, well, all we have to do is sack a worker every week, and we make $1 million. So, and that $1 million, we can hire more workers. So, what do that's the thing. So, I think that, when you're looking at this, I think you have to look at it from the perspective of a Navy SEAL. What is the credence of a Navy SEAL? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So if there are a couple of cow mutilations, which the government, federal government, has never regarded animals, I mean, even to this day, certainly no other nation does. I mean, the Chinese use them as implements of war. They used to light their tails on fire and send them into battle. So no other nation's going to do that. They'll be on board. They'll do it. So why wouldn't the U.S. do it? In terms of a couple of people, okay, so there's a couple of cooks in the woodwork. Well, who doesn't have it? You know? You mean tell me the Chinese don't have a couple of people? Hey, you know, like, that guy, he drinks too much, he smokes too much. We'll use him as a front. You know, to get this technology that's going to better us amongst other civilizations or other nations? Yeah, hell yeah. I think that the government would be completely on board. They would, not only would they would say, hey, you know, like, you want to abduct 10. We got 10,000.
Okay,
you know, like, look, you're the major city.
Okay, so you answered the theoretical. Now, do you have any direct knowledge of that actually happening, though?
I'm not at liberty to discuss any particular case that I've ever been involved with, and any particular event that I've ever been involved with. I will tell the Mindshock. I will tell the Mindshock listeners that this what Bruce is asking, I'm not involved with. This is. I'm not some UFO person or conspiracist or anything.
Let me rephrase the question. Hypothetically, have you heard any hypothetical rumblings from any hypothetical people you might have hypothetically worked with regarding this hypothetical deal between a hypothetical government and a hypothetical alien presence?
Yeah, and I'd like the Mindshock listener to tell me that, you know, their coworkers is, you know, around the water coolers getting a pap smear. Of course I've heard, like, you know, random ramblings. You know, I mean, like, you know, who doesn't? I mean, you know, like, if I worked in an elections office, you know, hey, like, you know, like, the internet cut out for, like, 2 minutes. What do you think? Like, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. It's, hey, you know, the internet cut out. What do you think? Yeah, no, there's a shining light. I mean, even Buzz Aldrin on a fucking Apollo 11 indicated that there was extraterrestrial life because he saw reflections in the glass, whether or not he...
We're not talking about any of that. We're talking specifically about a U.S. government deal with an extraterrestrial presence inside the...
And you're talking about my involvement, and I'm not going to talk about, you know, my involvement with the federal government with you, Bruce. I like my fucking benefits package.
I'm not talking about your involvement. I'm talking about hypothetically...
You asked me, well, you know, what do you know, like, do you have any second-hand knowledge? I ain't going to fucking tell you shit.
I said hypothetically. Have you hypothetically heard any rumblings of a specific name, not a generic name? I didn't think I had to specify.
Oh, I'm gonna tell you the truth because you used the H word. Ooh. Go ahead, Bruce. Keep going.
Okay, you're not going to answer. So, Colin Dickey's article here in the New Republic, August 28, 2018, Pioneer of Paranoia, How Bill Cooper Envisioned a Web Entangling Global Capitalism, the Government, and UFOs, and Incubated the Politics of Conspiracy, actually does detail him and Lear's involvement with each other. So Lear and Cooper teamed up, relaying an increasing manic and terrifying story of alien collusion with secret government forces while drinking each other under the...
I will say, you know, I actually take a certain amount of cred to other people. The reason why, and I just want to illustrate this because I have a real problem with Lear. And the reason why is I truly believe, and you could be wrong, but if you look at corporate America, so let's just look at it objectively. I view, the reason why I have a problem with John Lear is I look at John Lear as a groupie. A lot of the people that you mentioned had no earthly rhyme or reason to say what they said. Whereas John Lear did. He was basically like this self-made, bored billionaire that he'd do whatever he wanted.
Okay. In 1989, they released an indictment against the U.S. government demanding it cease aiding and abetting and concealing this alien nation which exists in our borders, they went on to demand that it must cease all operations, projects, treaties, and any other involvement with this alien nation, and ordered this alien nation and all of its members to leave the U.S. and this earth immediately, now, and for all time by June 1st, 1990, calling finally for a full disclosure of all alien government interactions. So this is kind of curious. So in 1989, they released this so-called indictment, and they even give the aliens a deadline to get off the Earth. Now, like this is kind of hard to wrap your mind around. So Bill Cooper and John Lear, I guess speaking on behalf of all concerned citizens, are giving the aliens a deadline to get off Earth and to never come back.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Jay?
Well, Bruce, I've been pretty candid over the federal government, and as a citizen, you've developed over, I don't know how old you are, but you've developed your own opinion, and the Mindshock listeners are of a certain age, and they've developed their own theory. Let me just ask you this really hard question. Would that surprise you?
Kind of. I mean, how many people have actually, like, just two guys are just going to write this open letter indictment and...
No. Would the fact that the federal government of the United States of America tell aliens that they had to leave?
That's not what we're discussing.
Would that surprise you?
But that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing Bill Cooper and John Lear writing this letter telling the aliens to get out and giving them a very specific deadline. I mean, to the alien, if the aliens are real, to the aliens, these are just two random guys writing a letter. I guess the point behind it was for them to let the aliens know that they know about them and that they've technically gone public to a certain extent, people that were in the ufology field. I actually wasn't into ufology in the late 80s. I don't know if you were, so you kept up with all of this. I didn't know about this as it unfolded. I only found out about all this many years later about Bill Cooper and John Lear. So I didn't know about this at the time. It would be curious if any older Mindshock listeners that were involved in Paranet or involved in discussion online, even let's say by the mid-90s, what was the sentiment at the time of the release of this letter? So according to this article that I'm going to continue here, their accusations were ludicrous, of course, but had an important and still largely underappreciated effect. As conspiracy theorist Michael Barkin has explained in his 2003 book, A Culture of Conspiracy, Apocalyptic Visions in Contemporary America,
yeah, well, I mean, like, Heaven's Gate happened in 1990, what? So I would say that their conspiracy had the ultimate consequence there. I think that,
You could wait for me to at least finish a paragraph before jumping in. The convergence of UFO...
I'm sorry, Bruce. There's a certain amount of passion involved. I'm sorry.
The convergence of UFO beliefs and general conspiracy theories brought conspiracism to a large new audience. UFO writers have long been suspicious of the U.S. government, which they believe has suppressed crucial evidence of an alien presence on Earth, but in the early years they did not, by and large, embrace strong political positions. Cooper and Lear helped change all that. They were the tip of the spear, asserting that the number one thing that we had to fear was not little green men, but the government that colluded with them, appropriating their technology against us. In the X-Files-esque decade that followed, Cooper's ideas, Barkin notes, brought right-wing conspiracism to people who otherwise would not have been aware of it. Cooper's dalliance with the UFO community only lasted a few years. In part, this was because he kept turning on his friends. Ever paranoid, he and Lear had an acrimonious falling out, and soon Cooper was accusing Lear of being a CIA plant. So this is kind of what I want to address. So Cooper soon began arguing that he'd been purposely misled by the government about aliens, that fed him the story to trick him into ignoring the bigger conspiracy, the one world government, which, run by the Illuminati, presided over everything. So, do you believe there's any truth to this, that John Lear, some kind of disinfo agent, tried to sabotage Bill Cooper to extent and use him as a pawn in furthering this so-called agenda of Project Bluebeam? And if
you really want my real answer, Bruce, or do you want me to ham it up for the audience, or do you want my real answer?
Just give me a real succinct answer without going off on 10 different tangents.
Are you a W-2 wage earner, Bruce?
What?
Did you pay your taxes last year, Bruce?
I just said without the tangents.
There's no tangent. Did you pay your taxes?
That's a tangent. We're talking about John Lear and Bill Cooper.
Just bear with me, Bruce.
I can't bear with you. Every time you say you're not going.
I promise I'll deliver this in less than 4 sentences. Did you pay your taxes last year?
That's way too many sentences. Just do it in one.
3 sentences.
We're talking.
2 sentences.
We're talking about.
Well, I'll negotiate 2. I'll negotiate 2 sentences. Did you pay your taxes?
We're talking about Bill Cooper and John Lear.
I understand. Well, you're asking if, John Lear was a government plant and all this other crap. I'll do it in 2 sentences. Did you pay your taxes?
I'm not indulge going off on
Please do. This once. I promise. 2 sentences.
Nope.
So, let's say you did. Period. Would that surprise you? Period. Good, Bruce. Keep going.
Stop asking if that's going to... I asked you for an opinion, and your response is asking me a question of whether or not I would be surprised. How is that relevant? You have a certain background. I'm asking you an opinion based on your background.
In my personal opinion, based on what you've expressed, it's not surprising that the government would generate a plan to deal with the situation at hand, which is an extremely vocal millionaire that has somehow predated the Oprah request, but has been able to manipulate media in order to generate a response for the viewing public of a diminishing voting republic across the spectrum of the early 1990s. Therefore, I believe, personally, that the federal government, in order to support its own self-preservation, would produce a plant which it could easily pay between $15 to $18 per hour, which at that point was triple the minimum wage, to work with John Lear to produce misinformation. So Mr. Lear would not perform what in the late 1990s would become an Oprah request, which would be a public information request that he could simply respond to, and the government would be forced to provide, or else they would be sued by Mr. Lear. Does that answer your question?
Not really, but let's go to the next point here.
Well, wait a minute. How does it not? Because I can give you a more advanced answer.
It's kind of a yes or no. So John Lear, was he kind of...
Yes, I believe the guy was a shill designed to fucking fuck with Lear. Period. One sentence.
You mean Cooper?
Cooper. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
All right. So let's.
I believe. Wait. Let me redo that. Yes, I believe that he was a government shill to fuck with Cooper. Period.
Okay. Thank you. That was probably the most direct you've ever been, JR. That's actually kind of mind-shocking. All right. So let's.
Well, Bruce. I mean, to be honest with you, don't ever deal with any kind of person that's ever dealt with the federal government and expect them to be direct. I mean, okay, I don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So let's just go over Bill Cooper's death real quick. Cooper moved away.
Jazzercise.
Cooper moved away from the UFO community and towards the militia and anti-government subculture in the late 90s. he became convinced that he was being personally targeted by President Bill Clinton and the Internal Revenue Service. In 1998, in July, he was charged with tax evasion. An arrest warrant was issued, but Cooper eluded repeated attempts to search. In 2000, he was named a major fugitive by the U.S. Marshal Service. On November 5th, 2001, Apache County Sheriff deputies attempted to arrest Cooper at his Eagar, Arizona home on charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and endangerment stemming from disputes with local residents. After an exchange of gunfire during which Cooper shot one of the deputies in the head, Cooper was fatally shot. Federal authorities reported that Cooper had spent years evading execution of the 98 arrest warrant, and according to a spokesman for the Marshal Service, he vowed that he would not be taken alive. Now, do you think that's convenient that they reported that he said that? Like, let's say he really did say that.
Yes, but let me just throw another layer on there, Bruce. There are politics involved in that, so you also have to understand that. And I don't want to add another layer, but this is Mindshock, and we do cover every area. You have to look at who was Dem and who was Rep when they were shot. And that's all I'm saying. I don't want to delve into it unless you do, but I'm saying that this could be politically motivated outside of what he actually knew and what was actually going on in the government at the time, because what he's spewing could be contained or released based on political ambition.
Yes, but I'm just saying, let's say he really did say, "You won't take me alive," just like in the movies, and a gunfight ensued. Would classier officers or marshals simply not say that, at least not make that public in a news article immediately? I mean, maybe in any kind of official investigation documents, of course, but to just make that public so blatantly, it almost sounds like they made it up to justify the shooting.
It's possible. I mean, it's also possible that he said that. Personally,
it sounds a little cartoonish. I mean, I don't know. Like that.
Well, okay, so it could also be the fact that, and again, we don't like to explore this, but it could be that, he suicided and they didn't want it, like there was a certain amount of respect involved, so they came up with a story that was thin, but, it didn't involve him putting a pistol in his mouth. It could be that, he also, there's a lot of different, see, you have to understand, Bruce, and this is why I keep revisiting this. I understand that this is a sore topic for you, but when you deal with the federal government, there is a brotherhood, and you have to understand that concept if you're going to explore these types of topics, because even though he could have been regarded as, oh, well, he was a complete shitbag, at the end of the day, there's a certain decorum. And what actually occurred and what was reported can be so far flung from what really happened. It's extraordinary. And only people that have seen it can understand that, because, again, we're talking about people. We're not talking about concepts or Wikipedia articles or anything else. We're talking about people that have conscience, and they want to be promoted, and they want to say, hey, look, he was a complete shitbag, but you know what? We gave him his glory on paper. That has to be understood if you're going to look at these types of concepts, because even though he could have known all of these deep, dark secrets, at the end of the day, he was shot in his own fucking home, because he didn't want to be arrested, and he was probably in his underwear, and he probably had his 9, and at the end of the day, it was probably really grisly. But
I don't think
they're not going to paint it that way.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was that. From the official story.
The official, and I want to preempt the official story. Keep going.
I'm trying to go.
I won't interrupt you anymore, Bruce, because you don't really want to hear my opinion. You just want to read what you're going to read.
I want to hear you.
I'm just telling you the way it is.
Yeah, but you could tell me after I finish my point, not interrupting me every single time. Tell me.
Have you ever seen a dead body? Have you ever smelled one? Do you know how what it looks like when you're bloated? When Bruce, this is Mindshock, okay? You asked me to come on here. I'm giving you what you asked me to do. If you want to just sit here and read and me to say yes or no, sir.
I asked you to interrupt. You could say the exact same thing without interrupting just 3 seconds later. It's just that simple. So the official story in regards to what...
You know that. I can't do that.
The official story in what predated the actual shootouts with the deaths, so there's no reason to interrupt me and say, yeah, the official story. I'm not talking about that part of the official story. I'm talking about a different part which you would have known if you hadn't interrupted me. So, allegedly, there was an incident with local residents where they drove up to his property, allegedly not directly on his property, but close to the house, and he confronted them with his weapon. Now, I don't know if anything happened. Supposedly there were just threats made, and then they left and they reported that to the deputies. So then the deputies responded, and that's when there was this altercation. Now, obviously, we can deduce a few different scenarios here. Either Cooper gave a verbal warning to get off his property or he will fire. He will fire at trespassers, and the deputies decided to engage, and then one of them gets shot in the head. Or they already had their guns drawn with possible orders to shoot on sight and kill, and he simply shot one of them and got killed by the other. Or, obviously, a slew of other situations like you outlined, another possibility. We don't know. We weren't there. But I just wanted to relay, as part of the official story, the precursor event was supposed locals just driving up to his house for no reason. That's all I wanted to add.
Uh-huh. And the leader of Murder Incorporated tripped and fell out a window. What's your point, Bruce?
The point was we have no idea who those locals were, or if there were fabricated charges, or if those locals were IRS or FBI agents or whatever, and they were just trying to entrap him. You know, who knows? I mean, we have Ruby Ridge. We have a lot of different situations with these anti-government folks like Bill Cooper. So let's circle back around to what we should have started with the whole time before going off on like 500 tangents. So Project Bluebeam.
Wait. Just wait. Before you go into Project Bluebeam, just while I'm really pissing you off, Bruce, I just want to ask you, why do you have such a problem with tangents? I mean, I thought Mindshock was supposed to be an open discussion.
It is. And every single tangent should be its own episode if you want to talk about it that badly. Like, we're trying to try to stay on topic. That's the whole point.
No one's talking about, it's just, you ask for my common ramblings. I mean, do you want to give me a yes or no, sir? I mean, I can do that if you want, Bruce. I mean, I'm just, I thought you wanted uninhibited dialogue.
I do, on topic. It's not, I asked you for a yes or no like twice, ever. Usually I want you to expand on your take, an on-topic expansion, not going off on things that have nothing to do with what's being discussed. Because usually they're pretty...
Sometimes it gets darker before it gets lighter, Bruce. Sometimes I gotta get...
When you stay on topic, you actually have some pretty good things to say that are...
Sometimes it gets darker before it gets lighter, Bruce. Sometimes I gotta go where you don't want to go, and I talk about shit that you don't give a shit about for me to frame what I'm about to say. But that said, I understand, and I'll try to comply moving forward. But because we've done more than one of these, that's difficult for me to do. But keep going.
So Project Bluebeam, as we stated, allegedly this government operation to manufacture a fake UFO alien narrative to set the stage for a fake invasion that would facilitate a one world government, a new world order, one world government. So Bill Cooper alleges, now I couldn't find an actual date on this interview. It's somewhere, I'm assuming from the early 90s, possibly predating Serge Monast, where Bill Cooper states that he found some kind of Carnegie document where it's from 1917, where some kind of Japanese official is talking about setting the stage for this fake alien invasion and one world government, or something of the sort.
Yeah, because they should be trusted.
I don't know if Bill Cooper ever exactly specified here, but then Bill Cooper also pointed to Nixon and various other presidents throughout history that have spoke of an alien threat and a united mankind, where that facilitated his own formation of Project Bluebeam, independent from Serge Monast.
What do you think about aliens?
I don't think there are any. At one time, I thought that there were, simply based upon documents that I'd seen while I was attached to the intelligence briefing team of Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. At that time, and even for many years afterwards, I did not believe that the government would use me in that way. I had devoted my whole life to government service. I had been in the Air Force, I was in the Navy, I was a river patrol boat captain in Vietnam, I had proved myself, I had combat ribbons with the V for Valor. There was no doubt of my loyalty to my country. And maybe that's why it was so easy to use me, because I wouldn't doubt that what I saw was real. But over the years, I've done a lot of research. And what I've discovered is there's no proof existing anywhere that extraterrestrials are real, or that have ever visited this planet, or that they exist anywhere in the universe. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere. There is lots of evidence, tons of it in fact, that there are a group of people collectively known as the Illuminati who want us to believe in some extraterrestrial threat from space so that they can cause a world government, bringing together of all the people to resist that external threat. The first time that I saw any reference to that, I was reading some papers from the Carnegie Endowment Fund, and there was a record of a speech. It was a dinner for Viscount Ishii of the Japanese delegation, the Japanese Imperial delegation, in 1917. And John Dewey was one of the speakers. And the first sentence out of his mouth, as I was reading this, almost fell out of my chair, because this was in 1917. And he said, the best way to cause all people of the world to come together in one world government and end war forever would be if we were attacked by some other species from some other planet. And boy, that just clicked with me, and I knew that this is just another scam. This is the age of deception. There's no doubt about it. And then 8 times during Reagan's administration, he inserted almost the exact same phrase into 8 of his speeches. And it's a scam. That's what I can tell you. What they call UFOs, these craft that fly around the sky, are real. But they're not piloted by some little green guy from some other planet. They're owned and operated by the United States of America for one, the Soviet Union for another, probably Great Britain, Canada. I think the first really operable ones were probably manufactured in Western Canada, in the wilderness, in a place especially built to create those machines, like we created the Manhattan Project, and the same kind of secrecy surrounded it. So the technology is real. It's been kept secret, and it's been used to promote this concept that there's an alien threat to this Earth. The cattle mutilations I've discovered in my research are nothing more than what's left after the government does its secret tests on the low-level radiation leakage from its atomic weapons assembly plants and atomic power plants. It's a low-level radiation monitoring project. And if you look at what's missing in the cattle, you'll see that it's just as clear as day. They take the lips, they take the tongue, they take a 6-inch patch of skin, they core out the rectum, the colon area, where those kinds of things would collect after they pass through the digestive system. On female cows, they take the udder to check for low radiation in the milk. This is being passed to the calves, and these are all grazing animals that graze on the grass where the radiation falls when it falls from the air, and it's just an incredible deception. And I'm just amazed that people have fallen for it in the manner that they have, in the absence of any proof whatsoever. I mean, they cite hearsay as proof.
Well, what about all of the alien abductions?
They're not abductions. They're the results of a tremendously successful and very sophisticated mind control operation, all of which has been in development. Well, they started working on those kinds of things since before World War II. But they have perfected them. On my website, I have a patent to the machine that can read your brainwaves, can recombine them in a computer and send them back to you and make you think things happened that never happened. I mean, you can't get a patent for something like that unless it really works. You have to prove it to the patent office. It works. The patent was issued. And this is just one of the things that snuck by them that has, because when people invent things like this, they're sucked up by the government immediately. And they're put behind the veil of national security and classified, and then nobody knows about them. But every once in a while, something sneaks by them. And when you do these searches in the patent office, and the trademark office, and in the copyright office, you come up with some real gems once in a while, and that was one. Also, the congressional investigations into the intelligence community has revealed the existence of these programs, and there's no secret about it. It's documented. Project Artichoke, Project MK Ultra, MK Naomi. I could go on and on and on all day long. And if you had the time in your movie, you could lay out all the documentation, which is official government documentation, and prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that it's true. But that's what it is. It's not extraterrestrials coming down. The human body cannot pass through walls or roofs, or through windows that are closed. This is all the product of the imagination and people's willingness to believe something because they want it to be true. I don't know why they would want it to be true. You see, because if it were true, these are not friendly aliens. They're doing some terrible things to people. If I were to kidnap somebody, pass them up through the roof, and take them somewhere, and perform operations on them, and take samples of semen and ova from their reproductive organs, and plant thoughts in their mind, and all this kind of stuff, and then bring them back, guess where I'd be right now? In prison. It's kidnapping. It's criminal. It's a terrible thing. So there's a morbid sense about all this too, is that people want to be hurt for some reason. I don't understand that. That certainly is something that somebody needs to look at. Why do people feel that this needs to be real? What in them says, I want to be abducted and abused and kidnapped and raped and all of this stuff against my will? Because they seem to take some kind of satisfaction that this is happening. And nobody's talking about the fact that this is a terrible thing to happen. If I were to do that to you, you wouldn't be too happy, would you? But somehow it's okay if an alien does it? I don't think so. It's all bullshit. It's a lie. And it's...
So where do you feel the hope for America lies?
Well, at this point, I've done so much research on this. I have to tell you, there's only one way this is going. There's going to be a civil war in this country. And I hope the outcome of the war will be the reinstatement of constitutional Republican government. But whenever you have a war like that, you're going to have competing factions to be the winner. And whoever really has the power in the end is going to institute whatever kind of government they feel should be there. There are people in this country who believe that a religious theology, or theocracy, should prevail. Well, if that happened, we'd have burnings at the stake again, and inquisitions, and heretics, and all of these kinds of things. So that can't be allowed to happen. Can't be. Doesn't matter what my religion is. It can't be allowed to happen. There are people who want a socialist government, much like the one in Sweden. There are people who want to create in the United States what the Soviet Union had hoped to be. There are real Nazis, all of them socialists. Hitler was a socialist. So I see the future as being tremendously dangerous for all of us. me and many others like me are going to perform a valiant attempt to reinstate, restore legitimate, lawful, constitutional Republican government. Whether or not we're going to be successful, I can't tell you. But I will tell you that once this war starts, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be bloody, and it'll last for 10, 15 years. That's the nature of this kind of conflict. If you look around at all these mountains around here, there's enough guns, ammunition, supplies, clothing, and food buried in these mountains to support an army for 15 years. And I don't think the American people realize that they're on the brink of a civil war. You see, there are many of us who took an oath. And we went in the armed forces and we meant it. We volunteered, we weren't drafted, we care about this country. And the oath was to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we will fulfill that oath, even if it means we die in the process of doing it. It's that simple.
So what do you see happening in the next 4 to 6 months?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. All I know is that the year 2000 is crucial to the plans of those who want world government, because they whipped up sort of a millennium fever and they coupled that with Y2K and a whole bunch of other things. Real religious people who think that this is the end of the world and Jesus is coming or somebody's coming imminently. And so there's this fever that's whipped up. I mean, everybody seems to be on the edge of some kind of hysteria. But it's all in their mind. If you look around, you see the world hasn't changed. It's not coming to an end. This hasn't been brought about by the hand of God. It's been brought about by the deceptions of man. And the quicker people realize that and try and find out who is causing these things to whip up this hysteria, the better off they're going to be.
So what is your overall take on all of that? And do you know anything about this mysterious Carnegie document?
No. And, yeah, like, in terms of what I think that, I don't want to tell you what I really think, Bruce, because, I mean, you know, like, honestly, like, none of this shit is actually surprising to me, to be honest with you. I mean, like, I just look at it from a human standpoint. You don't even need to look at this situation from a, you know, CIA or, MK Ultra, like, standpoint. This is just human bullshit. I mean, like, I can completely see the military getting involved with this. I mean, honestly, like, again, you would have to understand it. Like, you know, how easy this is to fall into. I mean, it's a rabbit hole. Like, this is obvious. I mean, yes, I think that the government was involved, and yes, I think that, like, you know, that a couple of your tax dollars, or your parents' tax dollars, went to funding this. I think it's, you know, I think it's safe to say.
Do you think the fact that even the name itself, Blue Beam, I mean, does that lend it credibility? Because, you know, obviously there's Project.
Okay, all right. So I will wait. Let me just say something. I think that the name itself is cheesy. I don't necessarily think that.
Yeah, but could you at least give me 8 seconds to finish the sentence before saying that exact same thing? Because the listeners don't.
Mississippi.
I'm not just talking to you. I'm talking to all the Mindshock listeners as well. So with the name, obviously in the past, since declassified programs like Project Blue Book, Project Blue Beam seems to match that naming, the way they name those things relating to UFO and aliens, as opposed to, for example, I don't know how many purple projects are there, or pink projects. There seems to be a lot of blue projects, and Project Blue Beam seems to fall into that naming mechanism.
Well, Bruce, I will say that, like, I think that, like, you know, maybe calling it Operation Magenta or, you know, like, Project Cyan would have been a little bit more, unique. But, once again, I could see some mid-level person in a cubicle coming up with a really snarky name because they got nothing better to do because they're about to go on a 2-week vacation paid by your tax dollars on a federal,
Final point here. What?
Wait. And coming up with something really snarky, but during a meeting, their supervisor having blue on their mind. So naming it Blue Beam instead of, something better.
Okay.
But, yeah.
I'm glad I wasted your time not interrupting. All right, so the final point here. What do you think of all this new UFO whistleblower information that's exploding all over Twitter, all over social media, all over mainstream media? Obviously not a single mention by any of these so-called UFO researchers about Project Bluebeam, because even if they think it's fake, I mean, there's a certain amount of intellectual honesty that would have been nice for these so-called UFO researchers to at least discuss it, either why it's true, why it wouldn't be true, just for the sake of intellectual honesty. So, yeah, that's the final point I want to discuss. Do you find anything strange about the timing? Are they ramping up the timing for Project Bluebeam? Are they planning to execute this soon? And that's why there's all this stuff on mainstream media about military whistleblowers, et cetera, and UFO disclosure.
Well, let me just put a couple things to bed. First of all, it's actually operational. It's no longer Project Bluebeam. It's Project Red Beam or whatever. Yeah, I mean, because the government, they have to change the name for whatever reason. I don't know what that is, but as soon as the media gets hold of it, it's got to become something new. So it's not Project Bluebeam anymore. But I will say that has it stopped? No, it hasn't, because they already have answers. They just can't. They're not going to publish to the media because they have this ethos. Then again, I've been bandstanding through the whole conversation. That they have their own thing. There's going to be a whistleblower in there somewhere, and we'll hear about him, 10 years from now. Is it still going on? Yeah, I'm sure it is. What has this entire podcast related, and what have I gained from it? I want some meatloaf and gravy. That's what I want, gravy.
All right, so you're not going to be helpful. You didn't address anything I just said, but okay. So that'll be it for the podcast. Hopefully the Mindshock listeners...
Well, no, I mean, readdress it.
No, I can't. I'm honestly exhausted just from, this is more exhausting than a Maxwell podcast at this point. So I will leave the Mindshock listeners to draw their own conclusions regarding so-called Project Bluebeam, whether it could be true, couldn't be true, and all of the latest UFO news. Because if this was all a setup going back to Ancient Aliens and all of just the aliens in the media, it's one of the most popular sci-fi topics. They've been shoving it down the people's throats through mainstream media for so long. Because a few decades ago, a large percentage of the population didn't even believe in aliens, so maybe they wouldn't have believed some kind of staged alien invasion. But now, aliens have been in the psyche of the masses for so many decades, decade after decade after decade, and the technology...
Yeah, but Bruce, media is dying. They got to come up with something. I mean, Fox News, and NBC, and CBS, and CNN, they're on their way out the door. I mean, they got to come up with something.
Again, this has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about aliens specifically and driving them into the psyche of the masses and fool them into possibly falling for some mass staged invasion to set the stage for the
and
world.
They're desperate, so they're staging a War of the Worlds situation.
And that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Was that a test run? Because that worked, right? How much of the public panicked en masse when that was aired?
I think it was. And I think that that's what we're seeing now. Is I think that they're desperate, they're dying. That we're in the world of on demand, so they got to come up with something. So look, let's just put it this way, Bruce, and I'm going to keep this short, all right? Because I know that I'm frustrating you, but the media, the the political realm is beholden to the media. But media is dying because we're moving into an on-demand era. So the politicians and political world have to remain relevant. What are they going to do to remain relevant? Well, they've got to enable what works to keep the population captivated. This worked. They're that desperate.
Actually, I think we should go over one more point just to make this comprehensive. So some people believe that the great deception in the Bible is actually describing a Project Bluebeam event. In Thessalonians 2:11 says that God in end times judgment will send, quote, a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie. This grand deception is associated with the satanic work of the Antichrist and, quote, displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie.
Well, it's definitely not the internet, Bruce. No way.
Well, the internet has both lies and truth, obviously. Let's look at another quote here. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Now again, regarding everything that's kind of going on in the world, some believe the Western countries have descended into Sodom and Gomorrah behavior across the board. So is this grand deception, I mean, all of these fake UFOs, and if they have all these crazy lasers and weapons and just all of this, and that could be great signs and wonders in the sky, would it not? And if it's fake, that could theoretically be discussing a Project Bluebeam scenario, could it not?
Yes, it could. Ultimately, if the Mindshock listeners really want my personal opinion, I think we'll kill ourselves out before we have to worry about a third party. But, maybe we will. Every government over the past 5,000 years has fallen after approximately at least 2,000 years. So we're not even 400 years old. So, I mean, the Americas can do what they will. So, I believe ultimately we will become the embodiment of the trilobite, which kills itself out during the Cretaceous period. But,
allegedly.
I don't know anything.
Some believe the Earth is only a few thousand years old. So, again, I will leave it at that. The Mindshock listeners can decide what to make of all the hoopla in the media about UFOs and aliens and whether Project Bluebeam has any veracity, although Bill Cooper's other predictions seem to have been very spot on. So make of that what you will. As always, if you want to help support the Mindshock podcast, find it interesting and informative, and want to help support logic and reason, returning to a world where it is quickly going extinct, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can also become a member on YouTube, help support the channel that way. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire, signing off.
And I'd love to hear from a Mindshock listener to talk to them, but this is JR tapping out.
Catch you guys next time.
Peace.